This is a picture of the late President John F. Kennedy, which was taken in Washington, D.C. in the car in which he was killed. I was in Washington working with United Press International, and I was at the corner of 16th and Pennsylvania Avenue, which is right in front of the White House, as you know. And Kennedy was a very public relations-minded president. And so every time there was a foreign dignitary came to the United States, he would have them picked up at their embassy in the morning and taken to Congress, and where they would address a full House of Congress meeting. And then he would go and, of course, meet them at the Congress and form a parade through the streets, and always was lunchtime. And so coincidentally, there'd be thousands of people out from their government offices at lunch. And so there'd be plenty of crowds on the street, and the dignitaries would be driven through in the open limousine and be made to feel very famous in that respect. So this was the picture. The day I took it was Ayub Khan. Ayub Khan was the first president of Pakistan, and he was visiting the U.S. And so he was on his way to the White House to a formal luncheon. And I was very happy to get the picture. And it was one of a few pictures, quite a portfolio I have of the Kennedys. And when President Kennedy was in Pittsburgh, a year later, after I took the picture, I went down to the William Penn Hotel where he was staying, and I met him and shook hands with him and asked him if he would autograph a copy of the picture, and which he did. He said, "Take it up to my secretary, Mrs. Lincoln, and she'll call you when we have it ready." And so I went and got it, and I also have the autographed copy still. But it's also in the Kennedy Library. There's a copy in the Kennedy Library in Boston. I was originally a photographer, and I was in the graduate school at Pitt, the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, and I realized that to really get to where the things were happening, you had to be in the news service. And so I went and joined UPI, which was United Press International. At that time, they were headquartered in the press building in Washington, D.C. on 14th Street. And the National Press Building was, at that time, sort of the headquarters of most of the press agencies. But I did a lot of assignments. I traveled to Northern Ireland to cover the Troubles in Northern Ireland for UPI, and then also for Reuters, another news service. I went to Ethiopia when Haile Selassie was deposed in the coup that put in the Marxist government in 1975. And I was there, and I was the person who announced the death of Haile Selassie in prison to the world. And I also did trips to Canada and covered Nixon's visit to Canada. And I think my most memorable was probably when Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 1968. I was one of 3 news photographers that was invited on the train. Mrs. Kennedy, Ethel Kennedy, chartered a train from New York City, where the Mass was at St. Patrick's, to Washington, D.C., where the burial was in Arlington. And I was between cars 5 and 6 on that train for 7.5 hours, taking pictures of the crowds that lined the tracks for 225 miles. At this noontime parade from the Capitol to the White House, the people, as you can see, were lined 8 deep. And it was rather a formal affair, probably one a week, maybe, during the first part of his presidency. because everyone wanted to come from overseas and see him and visit him and see how he was running things, so to speak. And the people were enchanted with this new King Arthur, so to speak, in his Camelot, and especially his wife, who had taken at least half the people by storm because of her fashion consciousness and her history consciousness. And she had redone the White House with all the historical archives that she could find. And so the people were very much, first of all, he was young, he was well-spoken, he had a great sense of humor, and he had a very positive program. I was very happy to be there, and I was very fortunate that both he and Ayub Khan looked at my side of the street, at me. Of course, I was standing out far in front of the police lines, so I was like by myself, so I was kind of easily seen by them. But it just so happened that they both looked at me at the moment, and again, Kennedy was a very charismatic person, and if he saw that someone was there wanting to take his picture, he obliged. And this was throughout my experience with the Kennedy family, even when Ted Kennedy came to Gloucester, and he had his new bride with him, and she hadn't really been photographed much. He let me photograph them on the shore, and with some friends of his that were judges up there in Massachusetts.